So, ladies and gentlemen, we've got two things happening this evening. There is the Carter Memorial festivities, and then there's the Harvey Award. Now, Charles Carter was one of the many founders, the major founders of astrology in Britain, the renaissance of astrology in the 20th century. After Alan Leo came Charles Carter, who was very formative in the development of the Astrological Lodge of London, and also helped with the foundation of the Faculty of Astrological Studies, which is one of the first major teaching organisations for astrology, founded in 1948. And then in 1950, people who founded really applied race and John Addy to found the Astrological Association. When he died in 1968, it was decided that he would be remembered every year by one of the leading astrologers of that day to be asked to give a talk to the Astrological Association and then also to the Lodge of London. And this tradition has been going now. The first person to give a talk was Ronald Davidson. There's, I think, 38 people who have given a talk over 40 years since Charles Carter died. And we thought, as this was 50th year, that it would be lovely to remember some of the people who gave talks by allowing 3 minutes or so to tell us how it was that they were asked, or they first a little bit about themselves, and then to tell you about what it was like to give the class, or whatever, what the main thing they want to be. Just little brief cameos. I think we know some of these people. We believe that more in the United States. And then at the end of that, Bob's going to speak for about 20 minutes to your group over there and our group over here. So, without further ado, I'm going to ask Jeffrey Cornelius, and after that the people are going to introduce themselves to start us off. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. I'm Jeffrey Cornelius. I gave the Carter Memorial lecture.
Yeah, tell him to slide over
there.
There. No, other way. Hey, we're working out the details.
That's for locality.
Yeah.
Right. Let me say, hey, Jeffrey Cornelius, and I get from Oxford, not 38. And I want to say to you that was a great honour at the time, and it very much helped my astrology at that time, because Carter Memorial represents this coming together of a community of astrologers. It brings together the Astrological Lodge, which is the oldest guiding body, certainly in European astrology, I think, and the Astrological Association has become so important and powerful in astrology. And this idea of bodies in the community working together, I know that's a big thing for you in the States, and it's really, really precious that we do that, and that's what this lecture represents. Now, just to tell you a bit about my work since the time, since that day, in 78, I think, was probably my first attempt in a public setting in astrology to lay out what I regard as important. A divinity of actual horoscopic astrology. So it was me taking a punt in the direction of astrology as divination. And that was my attempt to respond. Have I just appeared? Okay. That was a response, 78, to the absolutely disastrous attack on astrology in 1975. The humanist attack on astrology. So I was then presenting one possible answer from the astrologers on that one. So since then I developed a view of divination and astrology and divination. Other people have come forward with similar views. I'm not the only person taking that line. And in my view, that's one of the biggest philosophical questions for the community of astrologers, how they see what they're doing with symbolism. I'd like astrologers to ask more deeply and philosophically about symbol, the interpretation of symbol, and perhaps to get away from the desire to emulate science here, what the modern definition of science. So I people take me as a critic of science. I'm not. I'm a critic of scientism. We astrologers have a vision of reality that's so ultimately precious in our age, but it requires us to be quite critical and discerning amongst ourselves and of ourselves. We have to be our own best critics. So that's the message I'd like to leave you with. I think many past memorialists following me have carried on that sort of tradition. Whatever we might all agree or disagree on astrology, but we know it to be a precious thing. So that's the message I leave you with, and thank you for asking me to talk at the Cast Memorial 30 years ago, and thank you for this opportunity now. Good luck.
In 1988, which doesn't actually seem that long ago, even though we lived in a different world then. And the topic that I spoke on was what was then the upcoming Uranus, Neptune, Jupiter, Saturn alignments. That's all significance, and of course the world changed under those alignments, and things have moved on very strangely. But that's nothing in terms of geological time, nor is it very much in terms of the age of astrology, which is in its present recognisable form 2,500 years old. So what I was very passionate about back in was the question of astrology as diverse as many ingredients. Many ideas, many different ways of working, and it seems to me that is still the case. In fact, I'm happy to say there is no one such thing as astrology. There happens to be a single work, and there are many astrologies. And within the world of astrology, I think people recognise that, and the world outside they don't. And so everybody with competing ideas and visions of reality and ideas of how to work ends up in the same, I was going to say dustbin, but that's not the right answer. I think maybe the same fact of a rather Irish wine sharing. What I've learned over the years, I think, since I gave the Cast Memorial lecture, two things which I don't phrase negatively, but we should be agreeing. One is, it voices behind you. One is, don't believe your own stories. The other is don't be swayed by your own myths. In other words, stay free.
Sometimes in other disciplines, necessary philosophies, and whole rafts of different belief systems. And often in trying to subvert that in some way, there can be sometimes a tendency to move towards an imagined origin, as if astrology was once perfect and needs to be rediscovered in some pristine form. But of course that project is being carried out in the now. It's being carried out in the world in which we live, in which we inhabit, with all the ideas and the thoughts and the experiences of this age and now, and obviously reflected in the chances that are going on. So my part of that Cast Memorial talk was to revolve around this paradox, which it may not surprise you to realise I did not actually resolve. But I still try to follow that particular path. See perhaps ways of exploring how language is used and how the unique language of astrology can be expressed in the world. and that I continue to do, albeit in a somewhat low-key way. So thank you, and have a good day.
Can you hear it there? Yeah.
You can speak up a bit.
Yes, I will speak up. Is that better?
Yes.
Hello? Hello, I'm Lindsay Rademacher, and I gave the Carter Memorial Lecture at Cirencester in 1997, and I've been to almost every AA conference, two, I think. So I've seen a fair number of venues, but Cirencester, where we went 2 or 3 times, is one of my absolute favourites. For me, it was a highly memorable conference for both personal and public reasons. Princess Diana had just been killed in a car crash a few days before, and the world was reeling in shock. The funeral was that Saturday, 6th of September, and everybody at the conference gathered to watch it together on a big television screen, which was a very moving experience. At a personal level, this had a strange connection with what had just been happening in my own life. My husband had died 6 months earlier, and after 28 years of marriage, I was feeling somewhat adrift in the world. As it turned out, preparing for the lecture and having to get myself together to focus on what astrology meant in the process, it played a major therapeutic part in helping me to work through a period when my life had just turned upside down. 11 years later, I'm doing research at the University of Kent. The subject of my research is dialogue in astrology divination. And reading through the 97 lecture, I was really struck by the way it not only gathered my writers of astrology together up to that point, but it specifically foreshadowed my area of research. The title of the 97 lecture was Astrologer as Poet, Reporter and Storyteller. I talked about the stories that arise through doing event charts for significant moments, and there was one paragraph in particular which seemed to encapsulate what I was trying to say. I'm quoting from that lecture. Astrology as a divinatory art, a dialogue with the gods, has been the basis of what I perceive my work to be. I'm going to open up this idea of dialogue with the universe, because this really is the essence of what I want to talk about. We take this position of talking to people about their charts, translating the story told by the chart, while we listen to the client's version of what the story is. At the same time, in our lives, we are being talked to by the cosmos itself, which also tells us a continuous story. And towards the end, I said, quoting again, that as astrologers, we're not just reporters of events, we are artists and poets, highly creative people, because we not only interpret charts, which is a creative act in itself, we also conceive them. But it's only through being universe that synchronous meetings and event charts materialize. So, what I was trying to communicate 11 years ago in these sentences is exactly what I'm working on now at the University of Kent. At the beginning of that lecture, I said that it was going to be a very personal, interior sort of talk, and it was. At that turning point in my life, it helped me, more than I can say, to be able to stand up on a conference platform in front of a large number of people and to give a public statement of how astrology was the absolute centre of my life. That audience of astrologers, colleagues and friends at Cirencester in 1997 helped me by sharing my experience and responding to it with enthusiasm and warmth. Thank you very much.
In 1999. Now, a little bit of background. When I gave up school teaching 2 years with my wife Carolyn overland from the UK to New Zealand, and I wrote a daily diary comparing the astro events with what had happened to us, what was happening to us in our journey. I also was lots of people on their charts then, so I started becoming a travelling astrologer, if you like, even sitting on runs and doing it that way. That's how I learned astrology, on either field, using it every day, every minute. Now, since 1978, when I stopped travelling and we settled for a while in New Zealand, I started publishing projections and diaries and articles. And I also learned about karma, and especially Buddhism, from 1978 onwards. So, these experiences make my approach to astrology a cross between counselling based on karmic insight and mundane astrology. Because I'm passionately interested in society, I just tell you that I've got 4 planets in Aquarius trying the moon in Gemini in the 7th house, with Sag rising, trying by Saturn in Aries and Mars just moving on from it. So you can see I've got lots of ideas that I'm constantly being frustrated in applying them all. And I really want to start to change right now, or yesterday if possible. And so I think I'm trying to advise people or groups or even the whole world on the best way to handle astrological energy. Now, all this personal background, well, I'm going to say, if you really want to find out where I'm coming from, look at Astrology and Compassion, the Convenient Truth, which is a book I've just published. Look, it is a really powerful statement in favour of astrology from all these perspectives. However, in 1999, August, you may remember, there was a grand cross in Phipps signs and a solar eclipse, and that eclipse passed right over the southwest of England. And I was asked to give a cast of water lecture at a conference that the Astrological Association had decided to organise to actually commemorate or to mark that moment, so we could all watch the eclipse. And it was, if you like, the end of the world moment before 2012. If you remember, it was the time we all thought the world was going to end, or I did, but a lot of people were saying it would. And then, of course, when it did end, they started talking about 2012. This is 3 years in exile, it's very much into the end. So, in the great Tibetan tradition, however, the astrological associations activity around by promoting an event right under the path at the time of the eclipse. And it worked. There are 200 people here today. At that conference, there were 650 people from all over the world. It was the largest event we ever organised. And being asked to give a lecture to such a group of people was a totally overwhelming experience. I mean, you should have seen me standing in the corridor before I went on the stage. It was quite a mind-numbing experience. And I decided, with that background I told you about, to make my subject the healing power of astrology in history, society, and our lives. And I really went at it, hell for leather, to get all that through. It couldn't have been a broader subject, too much, I guess. But the basic message that underlined it all was as at then, as it is in a chart and statistic. What I was saying is, if you understand your charts and its development and your transits, and those of the society you live in, and act with consideration for other people, then amazingly good things can happen at the most difficult of astrological plans. And for sure we need to know this right now. Thank you.
Bernadette. I'm Bernadette Bailey, I'm the Australian. I did the lecture in the year 2000 and I did it on patterns. I'm deeply, passionately, intensely involved in the concept of patterns. And there's 2 things I want to talk about here. One, the working patterns I did on chaos theory, complexity, that then propelled me to doing a master's degree at Blast and moving to England and doing the dissertation on that subject, and then now tutoring at Atlanta University
University of Wales in the master's degree in culture and cosmos. If you like the ad, I go into that next. Right. He has to be my supervisor, so I've got to do this because I do PhD as well. But what I really want to say is the impact the lecture had on me, and I think I can speak for all of us, is that you hear about, you get a chance to do this lecture, you hear maybe 18 months to 12 months before you have to do it, and you're told that you can do any topic you like. So that ensures that you'll have 6 months of terror at 3 a.m. in the morning, trying to work out what you're going to speak on. That is the sort of pencil sharpening approach. Then once you've actually got your book released, on the act, we're on a topic that you can embrace your entire worldview of astrology and you'll be able to express it quite well. And you then spend a year preparing that lecture. Am I not correct? Yeah. Yes, right, and you're on. Yes, okay, you have more time. The thing is, it sharpens your mind. The thing is, at times, the journey, although it is through, it seems like fiery furnace for us who are to do it, it does take us to new heights in our astrology. And for that reason, I think the concept of this tradition that this community of astrologers have, of an annual lecture that is held in very high regard by the entire community, is a wondrous one, because I think it's that way that the community helps the growth of astrology and ideas. So what I personally gained from the lecture was the steadying my life that Lindsay had, rather the strength and the courage to say what I wanted to say, and the feeling that I actually could start to say what I wanted to say, open floodgates for me. So on that level, I want to thank the AA, great, and that's me done. Thank you.
Hi. Yes.
I guess I'm called a psychological astrologer. I call myself a navigator.
Speak up a little.
I gave it.
Right.
Okay, okay. That's it. I was incredibly shocked, pleased. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I never thought, because I came here from Africa to find an astrological community. And I was being asked by the community for the thing that for me was the highest honor. But I was given 2 years to do it, and I was told I had to write it. And so I did exactly what Bernadette did. But I spent 2 years writing it, and I wrote it about community, about the community of astrologers. And it was, I think it was probably professionally the most exciting thing I've ever done. And I've never forgotten it. The whole thing of it, the writing of it, the thinking of it, the love of it, the terror of it, and the giving of it at the end. Such a magical thing. And just before I left, it fell out of one of my cupboards on the way here, so I brought it with me. And I brought the last few pages with me, and I'm going to read the last paragraph and a half, because for myself, I still feel it very strongly. Okay, it's called Heaven Obscured, Confusion in the People, Navigating the Tides of Change. Because I was doing it on Pluto in Sag, and Neptune in Aquarius, and Uranus in Pisces, the times we were in. So, this is the end of it. And so here we are today. We are all joined up across the globe by our new technology in a fundamentally new way. I mean, that's even more true now. Everywhere on the planet, people are worrying about the future because we have too much information and not yet enough wisdom or knowledge together with nature for the good of the whole, or the worldview, sitting into a new paradigm, all being woven together, one little particle, the next wave. So many notions, images, and ideas will arise into and fall out of our conversations during this chaotic and interesting time over the next few years. In 2011, mutual reception will be passed, and Pluto will already be in Capricorn. We will have a new place in the deconstructing and reconstructing of our communities. But we are here now, and for the next 7 years, we'll apply ourselves to navigating the strange and sometimes unreal world within and outside, on the edge of chaos, where all life happens. We can hide from it, we can escape into cynicism and mistrust, or we can use our always inadequate skills to keep up the humanity, no matter what the external circumstances. This is our work. We are the people who watch the changing configurations in the skies, constantly searching for ways to translate their patterns into meaningful ways to navigate time. No matter how obscure the heaven, we cannot seem to stop searching then for meaning. No matter how confused the people, and no matter how confused we get, we cannot seem to stop loving this art. We are the navigators, reading the winds and tides for those who call on our skill and art. Thank you.
Elements of the periodic table. Human beings, rocks,
a curative remedy rather than a straight medical astrology actually looking at the disease. For example, I would have shown a case of a little boy who had terrible asthma. One of the things about it was that he was scared of boys. He only played with little girls and he hated rough and tumble. And he had terrible eczema. His hands had to be tied to the edges of his pot. And the curative remedy was Viola trichola, which is the pansy. And in less enlightened times, that is indeed what he would have been called. And when you looked at his horoscope, every planet is in earth. Every planet is in earth and water. Nothing in the masculine signs. But I showed sort of cases like that. So that's one of my horses. And my other one, if I did have one, would have been the idea of know thyself. You have to know what's yours if you're working with people as an astrologer or as any kind of therapist. So that would be another one we want. But anyway, it's a blast talking to you all.
You spoke, I think, in 1989 for a lecture. Over to you, Rob.
Got a little wiring here. Okay. The main thing I remember about my delivery of the Carver Memorial Lecture is the venues, especially the one for the Astrological Lodge, that lovely old guild hall that we had it in. I was quite blown away, as most of you all seem to have been asked to do it. I can't say that it took me a year to prepare it because I'm much more fluent at BSing my way through situations than many other people. And I was able to put something together reasonably easily, but it still was a very important and life-altering experience. But what I wanted to do today, since I've been given the task of kind of pointing the way, is talk a little bit about the future of astrology as it's rooted in recent events and based on the great past of astrology. And once again reiterate, in a slightly different way, I hope, my vision of what astrology is doing and where it should be going. And I just want to begin by mentioning something curious I discovered the other day when I was looking at a book list that we compiled in the early 1990s when we were first contemplating what later became Project Hindsight, the translation project of text from Greek and Latin. And I looked at this book list because we had all sorts of books from the Middle Ages, texts from the Greek period, and I remember thinking back in the early 1990s, where are we ever going to find these? And I'm happy to say that we found almost all of them. And many of them have been read and translated and commented on. So we're making tremendous progress in recapturing our past. Why do we need to recapture the past? Well, let me say at the beginning that we are not recapturing the past so we can go back to it. And having said that, let me continue on another vein, then I'll come back to that. From ancient times until modern times, early modern times, astrology has been part of the Western tradition. Its position within that tradition has always been somewhat mixed. There have been times when it has been enormously established, part of government, part of the political establishment, highly respected. There have been times when none of that was true. In the Roman era, for example, we have two people, Thrasyllus and Balbulus, who were astrological advisors to the emperors Nero and several other people. That was a period when there were quite a few emperors in a short time. Thrasyllus is not generally known to astrologers for what he really did, which is he actually codified the works of Plato as we now have them. And he was one of the most important scholars of his period, and he was an imperial astrologer. One emperor, Hadrian, practiced it himself. He cast charts, read them fluently, and was quite knowledgeable. According to Franz Cumont, in the period just before the advent of Christianity as the state religion of Rome, astrology became part of the established state religion. Never been back there since, actually, but maybe it's just as well. Of course, with the advent of Christianity, the status of astrology declined because it was associated with paganism, but it did survive, going only a little bit underground. With the advent of Islam, scholars among the conquered Christian populations continued to study astrology, and presumably its development continued. We don't actually know a lot about that period. It's kind of shadowy. And for a period of time, roughly the 7th and 8th centuries, astrology continued in the Islamic world only among the subject populations. But then, in the 8th century, the Abbasid dynasty took over, the Abbasid dynasty of caliphs, and astrology became solidly established in the Islamic establishment. And we have authors such as Masha'Allah, Sa'd ibn Bishr, Abu Mashar, al-Qabisi, and many others, who defined the astrology that has continued to be practiced in the Middle East and the West until the early modern times, and it's still the foundation of what we call Western astrology to this day. When astrology came to the Latin West in the 12th century, it came as part of a revival of learning that has caused that century to be referred to as the Renaissance of the 12th century. And in many respects, it was much more of a genuine Renaissance than what happened in the so-called Renaissance, which, by the way, historians now refer to as early modern times. And like the teachings of Aristotle that came with it, astrology was regarded with some suspicion on the part of the Church. But the Church was nowhere near as hostile to astrology in the Middle Ages as it had been in the Roman period. As long as astrology provided for free will, it was tolerated, no problem. It became very widely established, and one early modern astrologer, Lucas Doricus, personally predicted, and this is well documented, that 2 of his friends would become pope, and they both did. Lucas Doricus became a bishop. This exalted situation for astrologers continued until the 16th century, when fundamental challenges began to arise about astrology, and the new science began to develop, and great challenges began to occur, resulting in, for the first time in its long history, in the late 17th and 18th centuries, astrology became so completely disestablished that it was threatened with extinction, and only because of its limited survival, mostly in England, it did not die out. I just want to reiterate for those of you over there who don't know, your country saved astrology. In fact, the continuity of astrology's tradition were threatened by 2 factors: the rise of mechanist materialism and the resulting expulsion of astrology from universities, and this is the part that we don't know, we haven't paid too much attention to, but we should, the somewhat misguided efforts of the reformers to bring astrology into line with a new empirical mechanical philosophy, that which became modern physics. The earlier among these astrologers, Cardan, Kepler, Placidus, Marinus, and others, were extremely learned men who might have succeeded to some degree if the tide of history had not been so much against them. But the later ones, most notably John Partridge, were not only not learned in astrology, they were not learned in much of anything else either. They did, however, keep it going, so we owe them a debt of gratitude. The result was that when astrology began to revive in the 19th century, it had lost touch with the techniques of its tradition and with the philosophy of its tradition. When 19th and early 20th century astrology went looking for spiritual philosophical foundations, it had nowhere to turn except for the teachings of the Theosophical movement. It never occurred to them that what they were looking for might be found in the writings of Plato, Aristotle, Plotinus, Porphyry, and Proclus, among others, who were, especially the first two members in good standing of the mainstream of the Western philosophical tradition. The result of all of this was a perceptible lack of philosophical and intellectual coherence in much of modern astrology. Basically, your philosophy is whatever seems to make sense to you. Then, in the late 20th century, came the revival of traditional astrology. It occurred with 3 distinct movements. The first to come along was a revival of the medieval and early modern tradition. In the States, this was first pioneered in the work and writings of Robert Zoller, who learned Latin in order to read Guido Bonatti in the original. The legacy of that work has been evident this weekend here at Blast. Ben Dykes is a student of Robert Zoller. In Britain, this movement was led by the late Olivia Barclay and her students who made the special study of the work of William Lilly. The legacy of her work and teaching has also been evident this weekend at Blast. Deborah Holding is a student of Olivia's, among others. The second movement in which Robert Zoller and I also participated along with Robert Schmidt was Project Hindsight, the original intention of which was to study both ancient and medieval astrology, although in recent years its focus has largely turned to Hellenistic astrology. Zoller and I have continued in the medieval tradition. And the third movement of this revival has been the introduction and at last the assimilation of Jyotish. By the way, let me back up a moment. The second movement was the revival of Hellenistic astrology. I just realized I didn't make that clear. The third movement of this revival has been the introduction and, at least in part, an assimilation of Jyotish, also known as Vedic astrology. This has also been evident this weekend here at the Blast Conference. But the question all three of these have raised is what should be the proper relation of all of these with the astrology that came into being in the 19th and 20th centuries. Is our task merely to figure out which of these four, including modern astrology, which of these four possibly competing traditions is the correct one, and which one should we choose for all of us to study? Do we all either remain modernists or do we become traditionalists in one of the three forms that traditionalism seems to be taking? I think not. What is called for is for all of us to move toward a synthesis. This has happened before. Medieval astrology was in fact a synthesis of Hellenistic, Sasanian Persian, and Hindu astrologies. The last a little bit less than the other two, but still significant. The result was a system of great clarity, consistency, and power. I know of no other branch of astrology in which some form of theoretical framework is more evident than medieval, although similar patterns are being found in the Hellenistic. And while the revival of astrology in the 19th and 20th centuries of the West was to a great extent crippled by a loss of contact with the medieval tradition, some new discoveries were made, and most important of all, the single greatest contribution of the 20th century was to find a new purpose for astrology: self-realization. The view that the chart is not a fate to be overcome, but a map pointing the way to a complete, or at least more nearly complete, realization of one's own human potential. This now remains to be reunited with the medieval tradition and what we have learned from Hellenistic astrology and Jyotish. The ideal would have been that astrology had never gone through its near-death experience in the 18th century, that it would have kept evolving as it was doing, and then rediscovered its Hellenistic roots and encountered Jyotish. But maybe the only thing that we really lost with the 18th century interruption was a certain momentum, which I believe we are now recapturing. We still have a very long way to go. Our near pariah status in Western society has caused some disadvantages. We are just beginning to gain access to academic resources again, and the results are already bearing fruit. Nick, who is among you, of course, is one of the people responsible, along with Dorian Greenbaum and, of course, Charles Burnett, for creating the Warburg Conference a year ago last February, where scholars and astrologers met for the first time on an equal footing and really did exchange ideas, and it's happening again in November. The first one was on Hellenistic astrology, the second one will be on medieval. Resources to fund research of any kind in astrology, even historical research, are nearly non-existent. Our fledgling academic institutions and programs need money, but at least they are there. And I want to mention Kepler College, the program at Lampeter, the program at Kent, And there are probably others that I'm unfairly omitting, but these are the ones I know of personally. We stand poised on the verge of a grand synthesis. This will only happen if none of us in the various quote-unquote movements become attached to our own material as an orthodoxy. We must be ready to perceive elements in all traditions that may cause astrology to become more philosophically coherent, practically useful, and above all, to become a powerful new aid to the realization of the human spirit. And as we see the human spirit in astrology, it is not something marginal, it is not epiphenomenal, it is not merely subject to the blind laws of the mechanical philosophy, but is a principal manifestation of divine spirit in whatever manner you take that term within the universe. We and all other sentient beings in the universe are the universe becoming conscious. Astrology should be an integral part of the process, but only if we pay attention to all of the true witnesses of that process within astrology and what they have to contribute. This is the way to the future, the grand synthesis. Thank you.
To have this virtual link between the conference in the UK and the USA at the same time. Ben Knight, we've heard Rob mention, is currently in the air, and having lectured at the Blast Conference, he will be coming here to lecture at the AA Conference. So Ben Knight is our piece of physical connection.
Nice.
He realizes
Red Rover.
You're right. Other honour to perform, and that is the presentation of the 2008 Charles Harvey Book. Now, Charles Harvey was 15 years the president of the Astrological Association. He was a philosopher, scholar, teacher, profound thinker, and community organizer of absolutely enormous dedication and skill for 30 years. And he died, sadly, truthfully, 8 years ago. So the Charles Harvey Award was set up in his honour to be awarded to an individual who has contributed substantially to astrology in any way, in terms of organisation, philosophical speculation, teaching, publishing, any area, as long as it's of outstanding quality. And the award is presented to somebody who is nominated by the 10 main astrological societies in the UK coming together to be advised panel on astrological education. And those schools and societies, having nominated, then vote on the person who is the successful candidate. So this year we have 2 nominees. The nominees are Roy Gillett and Rob Hammond. Sorry, just I have here an envelope. And it's not the winner, which I will ceremoniously open. And the winner of the 2008 Charles Harvey Award is Rob Hammond. congratulations from everybody here in Charles Army would be proud.
My response. First of all, obviously I'm deeply grateful and very thankful for this award, and I want all of you over there on the other side of the pond to know I regard you as my dear friends and colleagues. And I thank you. This has been something of a summer for this sort of thing, beginning in May. But what I particularly appreciate about this award, and I'm not making any invidious comparisons, is that it does not imply that I'm finished. Because unless something goes terribly wrong, I'm hoping that my best work is yet to come.
Yay.
And I devoutly hope and pray that all of you and all of the people here will be beneficiaries of that work. Because it needs to be done. And there are many of us who can do it, and I'm proud to be part of the group of people who are doing it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We've done it, and it's a great relief. It's lovely to be with you, have a good conference, and maybe be in contact again, frequently and soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Before we go?
So hi everyone, and maybe you guys can come out to Arizona sometime, check out the sunshine. We'll send these folks over to England and have some tea with you all. And, really glad we did this. This was all Roy's idea. It was a fantastic idea. I hope you guys had a great conference as well. Ben gave a great lecture over here, so I'm sure he'll give a great one for you as well. And thanks a lot. Have fun.
Here we go. Come on. It's ridiculous. Oh, I get there.
Bye. How was that?
That was awesome! I'll put that on YouTube.
That was so cool. And
Hey, that's going on YouTube right when I get home.
Roy's idea, so give him a hug next time you see him.
By the way, I want you all to know I had no idea this is what was going down. Good. Quite surprised, actually. So I guess we're ready to get on with the next.
I guess we're going to take a quick break and then Deb is going to speak.